It's 1991, the year I was born, and it is a crime for two men to be together in the state of Kentucky. In fact, in most of the states of this union, it is illegal for two men to be together. This is a time when, really, the only openly gay celebrity is Elton John. This is a time before Ellen DeGeneres, before Neil Patrick Harris, before Anderson Cooper. It's a time before it became okay, popular even, to be gay. A time before Modern Family and Glee, a time before Brokeback Mountain, Milk, or my latest movie obsession, Call Me By Your Name. No, 1991 is a time where half of the states have criminalized same-sex relationships. It's a time where the moral majority has the microphone. It's the 90s, and we're still 7 years from Matthew Shepard's brutal murder. Right-wing evangelical organizations like Exodus International and the Family Research Council have the power. It's a time when gay kids are brutalized, ostracized, and thrown from their homes. A time when a boy or girl hanging themselves in their closet or taking their father's gun and blowing their brains out, all due to the overwhelming shame over their sexual orientation, isn't front page news, or news at all, really. This is the time I grew up in. 2003, December. I'm 12 years old. It's winter break, and I sit in the basement of my home in a quiet, affluent suburb in the east end of Louisville, reading a series of novels one of my classmates recommended I check out. They're a series of books geared towards teenagers and written by two prominent and influential evangelical authors. By the time I finish the second in the series, I am struck by terror at the prospect of one day being denied entry into the gates of heaven. I don't want to be numbered among the wretched, damned souls thrown into hell. I need a savior. Following the prescribed outline in the back of each book, I give my life over to Jesus Christ and become a saved, born-again Christian. As an act of devotion to my newfound life of faith, I endeavor to read the Bible in its entirety during what remains of my Christmas break. It's only a day before I reach the book of Leviticus, and there, in chapter 18, verse 22, I read, "Thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind. It is abomination." Suddenly, all the thoughts and feelings and attractions I'd begun to feel organized perfectly into a single box, are marked under a single title, abomination. I remember the summer days I spent as a child laying in the grass next to my neighbor when we made pretend that we had a family together, that we were in love with each other like our parents. All those things, abomination. I begin to cry uncontrollably. My crying reaches my mother, who stirs from her sleep and enters my room. She sits on my bed and asks what's the matter. I can't say the words, those words. Instead, I show her the verse from Leviticus. She's silent for a short while and, with a deep look of concern in her eyes, asks if I think that I'm gay. I nod my head sadly. The matter is put to rest almost immediately, and I'm told things will be addressed in the morning. I don't sleep that night. The next morning finds me in the living room. My grandmother has been called over. Not the grandmother who passed away just a few months earlier. The one who would have surely accepted and embraced me and told me everything would be okay. No, my other grandmother has been called over. The grandmother who, at this time, is the director of religious education at a local Roman Catholic parish. She doesn't say much this morning as my mother verbally and adamantly insists that I must be confused, that at 12 years old I couldn't possibly know my sexual proclivities and inclinations. My grandmother doesn't really need to say anything, though. She already has for years and years before ad nauseum. Being homosexual isn't natural, she'd say. It's like trying to put two plug outlets together. It doesn't work, it doesn't make sense, and it's not right. I'm not right. I know this now. I decide that morning to quietly and submissively retreat back into the closet. 2006, April. Over the past 2 years, I've delved headfirst into the Roman Catholic faith. I attend Mass daily, pray the Rosary every morning, go to confession every week, and engage in a number of other devotionals. I do this in the hopes of finally ridding myself of the dark and shameful part of my life that I refuse to acknowledge to anyone other than myself and God. But ultimately, there is no burying that part of my life, at least not fully. One beautiful afternoon, after having just got out of my all-boys Catholic high school where I'm a sophomore, I walk a few blocks down the street with a friend of mine to his place. There we mess around. And honestly, it's not the first time something like this has happened. But today, for some reason, the guilt and shame hit me harder than ever, and I leave my friend's house with hardly a word of farewell. I walk another block down the street and find myself in the sanctuary of an empty Catholic church, where I kneel in the front pew and begin to weep, praying that God would forgive me for my weakness, for my sin, for my disgusting urges that I can't seem to squash from existence. Only a few minutes pass and a young priest enters the church through the side door. He greets me kindly, and noticing how distraught I am, asks what is troubling me. I ask him to hear my confession, and he agrees, ushering me to the confessional off to the left of the altar. There, in the silence of the confessional, the sacred space of God's forgiving grace, I admit my sins, and I tell this young priest my struggles. Unbeknownst to me, this young priest happens to be one of just a handful of Catholic clergy with connections with ex-gay ministries in the Archdiocese. He offers me help, well, what he calls and believes to be help, and I accept, desperate to be rid of the feelings and thoughts I've come to believe are in direct contradiction to God's plan for me. A month later, and I find myself at my first reparative therapy group. Reparative therapy, also called ex-gay or conversion therapy, is a pseudoscientific treatment of homosexuals designed to change a person's sexual orientation. And in my 15-year-old mind, it is the best hope I have at redemption. When I enter the meeting room, there's only one person there, and he greets me cordially. By the time the meeting begins a few minutes later, the small room is now full of a half a dozen people. There's only one woman, the wife of one of the other attendants, and 5 men. I will come to find out that most of the men in this group are married and have long histories of cheating on their wives with other men. One attendant, I learn, is a defrocked Catholic priest who got caught molesting altar boys and who has been exiled to a monastery in southern Indiana and forced to attend these reparative therapy meetings. And then there's me, a scared, confused 15-year-old gay kid. I don't share at that first meeting. I don't share at the second one either. At the third meeting, one of the members shares that his spiritual mentor has urged him to compile a list of parts of the human anatomy that tempt him into impure thoughts. Halfway through quietly muttering the litany of parts of the human body, the man breaks down and tearfully admits that he struggles with what he calls unwanted same-sex attractions. The group leader consoles him and calls for a sentiment of solidarity. Who else struggles with unwanted same-sex attractions? He asks. We all raise our hands. And then I speak. I speak and I admit to this room full of strangers that I too struggle with unwanted same-sex attractions. I cry and I admit that I want more than anything else to be cured, to be changed, to be saved. All the attendants nod their heads sadly in understanding. 2008, January. I did it again. I gave in to my impure impulses and messed around with another boy at school. After school, I drive to the parish down the street from my high school and attend Mass. The former Archbishop of Louisville, the man who knowingly and systematically hid and moved pedophile priests from parish to parish for decades, offers the Mass. Afterwards, I ask him to hear my confession. You need to be very careful, the old man warns. It's because of people like you that we ever had the priest scandal in the first place. And I believe him. It's because of people like me, sick, deranged, wicked deviants, that the priest scandal ever happened in the first place. 2008, November. After almost 5 years of devotion, the Catholic Church has failed to help me in my war against my unwanted same-sex attractions. I convert to Calvinism, an extreme conservative form of Protestantism, in hopes that in this denomination, maybe, I can find an answer to my problem. I find myself a new church and a new set of spiritual mentors, and I throw myself even harder into my conversion therapy efforts. I'm 17 years old, working diligently to keep my grades up and to put on a good show for my teachers, for my friends, and for my family. Simultaneously, I'm attending church 3 times each week, attending 3 weekly reparative therapy meetings, and surrounding myself with other devout Christians, still working towards ridding myself of these sinful, wicked, disgusting urges. I began electroshock therapy under the mentorship of one of the reparative therapists. I must keep it a secret, something I've already accustomed to, because such methods are actually prohibited for minors in Kentucky. Laws mean little to me or to the reparative therapy community. We're trying to do God's work, not man's. I begin to think heavily and frequently about killing myself. Why shouldn't I? Yes, it would be a sin, but so is living my life with these unwanted same-sex attractions. So which is the greater sin, to off myself or to continue on, occasionally caving in to my unnatural urges? Honestly, I'm not sure which option God hates more. August 2009. At 18 years old, I graduate from high school and am set to enter the seminary in the fall. During the summer, I get a job at a local sales firm where I meet an entirely new group of people, individuals directly opposed to the church members that I'd affiliated myself with all of my teenage years. My employer himself is an openly gay man. This culture, this outlook on life is entirely new to me. Eventually, in the winter of 2009, I leave the church entirely, but the ghosts and traumas of the past do not fade into obscurity as I hoped they would. And I still can't bring myself to admit who I truly am. I still can't utter those words. February 24th, 2010. I'm sitting on the patio of a bar here in the Highlands on Bardstown Road with two co-workers and friends of mine. I've been seeing someone for a while now, though in secret because we're both still in the closet. Perhaps it's because the internal pressure is about to split me apart, or maybe it's because I've had a few too many drinks, but suddenly a single thought occupies my consciousness. Tell them you're gay. Before I can force the thought from my mind, the words escape my lips. And to my surprise, I'm not met with doubt, or with judgment, or with condemnation. Instead, I'm met with understanding and acceptance. I decide that moment to finally leave the suffocating closet and to never return again. July 17th, 2010. I've met understanding, compassionate people. I've been accepted for who I am by a whole host of friends and supporters. I've finally been able to say those words, I'm gay, and I've restated them over and over again to nearly everyone in my life. I thought all that would be enough, but it's not. I can't get the voices of the preachers and the pastors and the priests and the reparative therapists out of my head. I still can't get over the years of shame and self-hatred. I can't recover from the hundreds and thousands of times I've been told, or told myself even, that God hates me, that my feelings are unnatural, that I'm damned to a life of sorrow and an eternity of hellfire to follow. It all won't leave me. And so I stand in the middle of a train trestle in Fisherville, Kentucky, readying myself to make that one final leap. I'd heard about this bridge when I was younger, probably around the time that I first identified and acknowledged my sexual orientation. We used to live down the street from the train trestle, and I remember my grandfather telling me that a number of kids had fallen to their deaths when exploring the area and coming into the line of an unstoppable locomotive. I figure this is as good a place as any to end it all. But I don't jump. In a moment of sanity, I decide to seek help, real help, in the hopes of ridding myself not of my sexual orientation, but of the terrible lies I'd been fed for over half a decade. 2011, June. It's a warm summer afternoon, and I walk the streets of downtown Louisville in the Gay Pride Parade. I'm surrounded by men and women, diverse in our differences, but also the same in our experiences and mission. We're here with untold traumas and obstacles behind us, finally freed of the oppressive closet. The next morning I wake up to my picture on the front page of the newspaper, standing amid a sea of rainbow banners and balloons. As I think about the world today, I am amazed by the progress within and without the LGBT community. Elton John has a lot more company now. I'm not sure why I decided to make this video to lay out my story in such raw, unapologetic frankness. Perhaps it's because today, February 24th, is the 8-year anniversary of my coming out. Perhaps it's because telling my story and revisiting these places of significance in my early life has been therapeutic. Primarily, though, I think I made this video for my little sister, who is now the age when I first told my mother that I'm gay. My hope is that no matter where life leads her, she might find understanding and acceptance, as I now have, and that she might never seek to change who she is to fit a preconceived mold of who others think she ought to be. There are kids today, all around Louisville, all around Kentucky, all around this nation and all around the world, who are being told by their churches, by their communities, and by their families that they are less than just because they are gay. There are boys and girls who go to sleep each night praying to their God for change that cannot occur. There are young people debating on whether or not to kill themselves because living has become too unbearable, too difficult. And to them I send my life story and the message that there is hope on the other side. Despite all the progress we've seen, the cause is not over until every person can find understanding, acceptance, and love.